In the ongoing effort of getting my channel taken down by YouTube, I want to dive right into a rather thorny issue here. The transatlantic slave trade or the Atlantic slave trade. Sometimes it's referred to either with either titles. And the reason why I want to get into it is because unless you've been living under a rock, you realize that it's not the full story behind the rioting going on across the world, the Black Lives Matter stuff, but it's definitely part of it. And I'm sure the nitpickers are going to come at me and gnash their teeth and all the things they do and say, oh no, the George Floyd protests, and they're going to call them protests rather than rioting, whatever. They're about police brutality. Well, okay, they're somewhat about that, but a lot of the conversation involved in why the rioting's going on also talks about reparations and slavery in the United States. So that's what I want to get to here. I want to get to whether or not all of the hot air around the supposed plague of slavery in America, I want to get to whether or not all the hot air around it, if it's actually warranted or if maybe it's just that hot air. So there's going to be some math in here. Don't pass out. Get a paper bag and sit down and breathe into it if you need to. Don't run away on me. It's just going to be simple multiplication, addition, subtraction, division, stuff like that. Don't panic. Because we need to, in order to put things in perspective, we need to do some math. Math helps you put things in perspective. And all of my sites that I use as sources in here in this video are going to be down in the description box if you want to research them yourself. And I encourage you to do that because here's the thing. We're going to be talking about historical numbers, and historical numbers are always murky. It always seems to be the case that everybody has their own version of them. And what I want is I would like for people who, on any side of this issue, if you agree with me, disagree with me, you're ambivalent, if you do your own research and try to come at me and take my numbers apart, which is fine, which is what I would like to see, just do me the favor of putting it all in a comment in the comment section for this video so I can check it out too, so I can check out your links. Now, anytime you in YouTube, because YouTube's a pain in the arse with this, anytime you put links, especially many links, in a comment, it automatically sends them to spam directory. I hope we're not at the point where YouTube is just deleting comments that have a bunch of links. We might be. But if it ends up in my spam directory, I'm going to do my best to pay attention and approve it and get it back out into the comment section where everybody can see. So don't lose your mind if it doesn't show up right away in the comment section. If it's within my power, I'll make sure it becomes, whether or not it's tearing me a new sphincter or not, I'm going to do my best to get it into the comment section as quickly as possible because I want everybody's opinion on this after I lay down what I think the state of affairs is. And I think probably most of you are going to agree with me because, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's get to it. The first site here is something called the World Future Fund. Now, I do not vouch for the veracity or lack thereof of any of these sites. Like I said, I want you to do your own research and come at me if you think what I'm posting here is ridiculous. But, I think at the very least, what I'm going to present here is worthwhile to the conversation, if not 100% accurate. And this first one's a doozy. So the first thing you should notice is the worldfuturefund.org is not a secure site, and that should send off some warning flares right away. Whenever you're dealing with an unencrypted site, that means that somebody really hasn't done the true due diligence for this website. It really should be a trusted connection between you and the server serving out the web page to you, so that it's impossible for whatever interaction you have with the site to be sniffed by somebody else. So it's just a bad sign. It's not always a sign of a site you should just discard out of hand, but it's just something you should keep in mind if you see an unsecure site like this. Anyway, so we're at the worldfuturefund.org, and let's just read the title from this website. Death toll from the slave trade. Okay, so first thing is, I'm pretty sure this site, in fact, I'm positive this site is talking about the transatlantic slave trade. Now, there are many historical slave trades. There have been many slave trades throughout history. But obviously, this site is focused on the transatlantic or the Atlantic slave trade, right? You would figure. I just think it's an oversight on their part. They didn't clarify which slave trade they're talking about in the first title here, but the subsequent text on the site makes it pretty obvious what they're talking about. And they've gone ahead and called it the African Holocaust. According to the worldfuturefund.org site, 60 million dead at the hands of white Christian imperialism. Wow. That is a strong claim. 60 million dead Africans from white Christians enslaving them. That's incredible. I mean, if you're a slaver, would you want to kill that many slaves? I mean, at that point, you're not a slaver. You're really just a genocider, aren't you? Why would slavers want to kill that many people? That's weird. But according to the worldfuturefund.org, that's what they did. Okay, so let's see what they're talking about here. Because, as I said, it's unclear whether or not they're talking about the transatlantic slave trade, but I think we know what they are. The largest slave trade, I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to get to the bits that I think are important here, and you can, like I said, they're in the description box below. You can check everything I say based on these sites and go to other sites and let me have it and link them in my comment section, blah, blah, blah. All right, last time I'm going to caveat that, hopefully. The largest slave trade in the history of the world was created by white Christian Europeans. Wow. Before it was over, as many as 6 million Africans would be killed for the profit of white Christian imperialism. You know, they called it the African Holocaust. It's funny how often that 60 gorillion number comes up during Holocaust discussions. Oh, it's shocking, I tell you. All right, so they've got that strong claim, largest slave trade, 60 gorillion Africans, blah, blah, blah. And then it's weird, like a couple paragraphs later, they kind of walk it back. It is difficult to estimate the exact death toll that resulted from the transatlantic slave trade. Well, it's difficult, but they did it anyway, I guess. There weren't exactly people measuring those numbers at the time. Okay. So here's some further walking back by the worldfuturefund.org site. The estimate of the number killed during the transatlantic slave trade varies anywhere between 6 to 150 million. That is an incredible range, I gotta say. That's impressive. The official UN estimate is 17 million, is the UN estimate, okay. However, we ourselves would be inclined to agree with the figure of 60 gorillion. There you go. Okay, so that's enough of the world futurefund.org site. Just wanted to start off giving you an idea of what people think went on with the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, there are people out there who think that the slavers went in there and through either negligence or intent decided to kill or negligently killed 150 million people. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's now go to a site that maybe walks that back even a little more. And this is PBS. So you would figure this is a source, this is a site that is trusted by most liberals. I think they rely on PBS to be a fairly accurate source, I would hesitate to say. Now, of course, that comes with the proviso that anytime you disagree with the radical fringe, even if you're a very liberal source or a very liberal person like Henry Louis Gates, as soon as you disagree with them, now you're a Nazi and you're to be castigated, you're to be ostracized, you're to be whatever. You're thrown out of the approved loop of the fringe, right? So this is a site asking how many slaves landed in the U.S. Now, it's interesting because the title of this website says how many slaves landed in the U.S., but it only goes on to answer how many slaves landed in North America. So does PBS not know the difference between the U.S. and North America? I think the PBS public broadcasting station does know the difference. I don't know why they have this oversight. It's just, all of these, they're so annoying when this this topic just, people lose their minds and they don't dot all their I's and cross their T's, and I might not either throughout the duration of this video. But it's just the silly mistakes and oversights. It's just it's telling of how crazy this topic gets people. But anyway, according to PBS, I've already got it highlighted, so let's re-highlight it here. So first of all, it says, and how many of these 10 million Africans, now they're talking about, in PBS's estimate, or in Henry Louis Gates's estimate and his research, he came up with 10.7 million Africans enslaved by the transatlantic slave trade. So the first thing you got to think is, how did 60 gorillion people die if only 10.7 million were enslaved or transferred across the Atlantic? That's a neat trick. So there's that. But anyway, so PBS has got the number at 10.7 million. And how many of these 10.7 million Africans were shipped directly to North America? Again, the title of the site asks how many landed in the U.S. Or whatever, we'll just forget about that for a second. Only about 388,000. That's right, a tiny percentage. So PBS, the trusted liberal news source, says it's a tiny percentage that went to North America. So for the geographically challenged, let's remind ourselves, which PBS seems to be among those numbers, let's remind ourselves here that North America consists of Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. It's not just the U.S., right? So what I want to do here is I want to break down what percentage of that tiny percentage of the 10.7 million that went to North America actually belongs to the U.S. And I'm going to do it, by process of elimination. We're going to look at Canada first, then Mexico. We're going to subtract those totals from the 388,000 total that PBS gave us, and we're going to get the total U.S. total. That's simple math, right? Don't, again, get the paper bag, start breathing into it if you need to, if you're hyperventilating already. So let's start off with Canada, Slavery in Canada, and you can go through all this as you want, if you want. Considering how little slavery Canada actually had, this is a very large Wikipedia entry. So let me get right to the part where it gets to a number here. Historian Marcel Trudel estimates that there were less than, really, Wikipedia, then spelled T-H-E-N, less than 4,200 slaves. All right, so I don't know what that means. I'm just going to apply a 3,000 number to Canada. Canada, in my humble estimation, had 3,000 slaves. And you can come at me if that irritates you, but that's what I'm giving Canada. The stickier, trickier, harder number to get at is, in fact, Mexico. Mexico is a difficult one. I think maybe for obvious reasons, maybe not. So let's first go over what source I've got here. Something called the SmithsonianEducation.org. Now again, reminder, I'm sorry I have to throw this reminder in again. I'm not saying anything about the veracity of these sources. I don't even know if this site is truly connected to the Smithsonian. Again, it's another unsecure site, so that's throwing off some warning flares in my mind anyway. But the reason why I'm still using it in this video is because it comes to a number that I often come to no matter which sites I go to. This seems to have the number that I most often see when I try to figure out what Mexico's share of the transatlantic slave trade was. So let's get right to the paragraph here that illuminates that. The historical record, let me go ahead and highlight this text in case, whoops, a little tricky highlighting there. The historical record, of course, tells another story. In the 16th century, New Spain, as Mexico was then called, probably had more enslaved Africans than any other colony in the Western Hemisphere. Blacks were present as slaves of the Spaniards as early as the 1520s. Over the approximately 300 years it lasted, the slave trade brought about 200,000 Africans to the colony, to Mexico. Okay, so there you go. There's the critical bit there. And like I said, that's the number. Whether or not this particular site is anything you can trust, That's the number that I generally see, that I come up with when I look into what Mexico's share of slavery was. So let's head on to the next site here. And lo and behold, this is a little HTML page that I drafted up myself, because we're at the point where we can do some calculations. So PBS told us that 388,000 total slaves came to North America. Our SmithsonianEducation.org site, and many other sites that I've seen, says that Mexico had about 200,000 of that total. And Wikipedia and my little fine-tuning puts Canada's total at 3,000. So that leaves 185,000 African slaves coming to America, coming to the United States. Let's clarify our terms here. Talking about the country, the United States of America, not the Americas, not the New World, just the United States. 185,000 slaves. So if we divide that by PBS's 10.7 million number, I'm not going to go ahead and divide it by whatever total slave number the World Future Fund, that's got to be in the hundreds of millions. If 60 to 150 million of them died, I can't even imagine how many slaves the WorldFutureFund.org claims were moved onto ships by Europeans from Africa. But anyway, so let's stick with PBS's number. It seems more reasonable. So if we divide 185,000 by 10.7 million, we get less than 2% of slaves were brought to the U.S. during the Atlantic slave trade. This is what the hysteria is about. This is what all the talk of reparations is about. Less than 2% of the share of the transatlantic slave trade. And, I can hear the nitpickers already. There's a couple things going on with the nitpickers right now. They're dissembling, they're scrambling, they're trying to think of ways why my point is not as strong as I think it is, and they're just mad with mental energy right now, trying to figure out ways how they're going to take apart this argument here and my point here. The first thing they're going to say, oh, we're protesting. No, we're protesting slavery everywhere. Oh, really? And then the next thing they're going to say, they're actually going to contradict themselves, because they're going to say, oh no, the rioting, the George Floyd rioting, the Black Lives Matter rioting, the recent rioting, and they're going to call it protests. They're not going to call it rioting. That was about police brutality. I don't know why you're talking about slavery. Oh, really? Because, none of the reparation talk and the slavery talk has come up in any of this rioting or anything. You got to be fooling yourself. Because first of all, here's Black Lives Matter Twitter. Now, obviously, they're huge on the George Floyd stuff. But they're also, you can see, reparations, they're constantly talking about reparations, constantly. So if it's a Black Lives Matter riot or protest, whatever you want to call it, it obviously had part of the inspiration, part of the impetus, and if I'm going to put an estimate on it, a significant part of it is about slavery and reparations. Because what is all the talk about systemic racism about? If it's not about the supposedly evil slavery on the part of the U.S. centuries ago, which turns out to only be less than 2% of the total transatlantic slave total, then what is systemic racism? So if the George Floyd protests were strictly about police brutality, and the nitpick that I'm going to get hit with this video is that, I'm making a big deal out of slavery and reparations when it has little or nothing to do with the protests, why is it that the subsequent rioting, mobbery, whatever was going on, went after all these statues of supposed slaveholders like Thomas Jefferson? And everybody's talking about taking down, Mount Rushmore because it has slaveholders in it. If the whole George Floyd thing, if the whole Black Lives Matter rioting, protesting, whatever, has nothing to do with it, then why are we tearing down these statues? What did Francis Scott Key have to do with police brutality? Because he made the national anthem, he encouraged police brutality. It's all inherent to it. And that's why this video is about the slave trade. So telling me that this whole George Floyd protest thing is not about slavery and reparations is BS. Sorry. That's not flying in my comments section, and I'm going to let you have it. But if you want to tell me that, if you want to try to nitpick that way And whatever. It's good luck with that. So, yeah. So let's check out. It's interesting. So, again, the country that had 2%, less than 2% of its share in the transatlantic slave trade, has about 99.9% of the George Floyd protests. Now, over here in Europe, we can see pretty much anywhere white people are. And, I'm sure there is a server or many servers somewhere at Google or YouTube headquarters that is now catching on fire from me igniting the algorithm into... I don't care. This video is probably never going to be seen by anybody on YouTube. It'll be over on BitChute where it'll actually be seen. So I just don't care. The YouTube algorithm, it does. I can't factor it into my thinking when I want to do a video. It just takes. Then I can't even do the video. If I can't speak plain truths, then what's the sense of doing the video? All right. Anyway, so yeah. So here we see that Europe was not part of the transatlantic. It's not considered part of the transatlantic slave trade. Maybe it is. I don't know. But when you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, we're talking about Africans being transported to the New World to become slaves. That's mostly what it's about. And lo and behold, the country with supposedly the worst systemic racism, and the country that needs to cough up the most reparations, which only had 2% of the transatlantic slave trade, less than it, seems to have 99.99999% of the Black Lives Matter rioting and protests, or whatever they are. Because this is a map, as you can see down on the caption down on the bottom here. Cities in North America with George Floyd protests with more than 100 participants. Minneapolis, St. Paul is marked in red. That's this one here, obviously, because that was the start of it all, right? That's George Floyd's hometown there. And Mexico, which had more than half, only had one. Only had one in Mexico. So that's it. Hawaii had significantly more protests with more than 100 participants than Mexico. It's interesting, huh? Look at Canada. Canada with 3,000 slaves. Look how Canada's getting its disproportionate share without a doubt. Okay, so there you go. That's what I wanted to get at in this video. I just wanted to put it all in perspective. The amount of hot air over America's supposed systemic racism versus the numbers that we can attribute to its share of the transatlantic slave trade and in slavery is just, it's so off the charts and disproportionate. And that's what I wanted to get at in this video. And there's one more thing I want to highlight just to show how absurd this 185,000 number, this American slave number of 185,000 U.S. slave number. Again, I don't want to confuse America with the Americas, with the New World. The United States, its portion of the transatlantic slave trade, which works out to 185,000. Just to further highlight that, I want to look at one other thing here. And that's the Barbary slave trade. Now, as I said in the beginning, there are many slave trades that have gone on throughout history. Transatlantic slave trade is just one of them. And the Barbary slave trade is one of them. That happened about the same time, as the transatlantic slave trade. So that's why I want to compare it here. And you never, ever hear about the Barbary slave trade, I think, for reasons you will see as obvious as I go through the poignant bits from this Wikipedia entry. But the Barbary slave trade was North Africans or Africans and Ottomans taking white Europeans as slaves. That's interesting. I don't even remember in high school ever hearing about the Barbary slave trade. I think I had a few history classes in college that went over it, but I can't even be sure of that. I think I became aware of the Barbary slave trade just through YouTube videos and people talking about it on YouTube. So, that's probably indicative of my poor education, but whatever. It's not like I was in some destitute area when I was educated. Typical American upbringing and education, and I went to college and got my college degree. So Is that my fault that the Barbary slave trade wasn't brought up? I guess I could have picked, intentionally picked a university that made sure I was going to learn about it. But if I didn't know about it, that's a catch-22. If I didn't know about the Barbary slave trade, how could I pick a college that would be sure to talk about it? Anyway, okay. So we're not going to go over this too much. We're going to get right to the important bit. And so there's a few numbers here in one historian's estimation. And he seems to, for whatever reason, it seems to be broken up into two time periods that overlap, and it's difficult to get a number. So let's just talk about the one time period here. So by extension, for the 250, let me highlight it here so you know exactly what I'm talking about. By extension, for the 250 years between 1530 and 1780, the figure could easily have been as high as 1.25 million white Christian Europeans enslaved by the Turks or the Ottomans or the Northern Africans, and so, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. 1.25 million Europeans enslaved. And yet, we have America being lit on fire, in part over 185,000 slaves being brought from Africa to America. And on top of that, their descendants, the descendants of those 185,000 slaves, have a higher standard of living, have a higher life expectancy, have a higher average IQ, higher household median income, on and on and on. All of the numbers that tick off the standard of living are all higher in the U.S. than they are pretty much anywhere throughout the world except maybe Europe, which also is seeing an incredible percentage of these Black Lives Matters riots and statues torn down and all this crap. So I'm sure this video is going to get buried by YouTube. So if you enjoyed it, if it enlightened you, if it brought up some things you didn't know, be sure to share it somewhere so at least somebody sees it. Because YouTube's going to do its best to kill it. Because like I said, I hit all the terrible buzzwords in this video, and the algorithm is working in overload right now, and servers are catching on fire at Google and YouTube headquarters. But yeah, that's what I wanted to get at. I wanted to put some perspective to the whole Atlantic slave trade thing and how it contributes to what we're seeing happening with the rioting and the protesting. And I wanted people to understand how absurd it is. It's not like I'm excusing 185,000 slaves. I don't want to see 5. I don't want to see 1 person enslaved. But when we consider the history of the entire world, is it at all fair to hit America like it's the epicenter of all slavery, the worst thing that ever happened slavery-wise in the history of the world? It's absurd. And that's all I wanted to get at in this video. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. And if this video doesn't get me taken down, I'll see you in the next upload.